Good evening and welcome everyone to the webinar on shift left testing, accelerating quality assurance in agile environments. We're glad to have you all here today. I'm Arjun, your host for today's webinar. On behalf of Kalpita Technologies, I extend a warm welcome to each one of you. Before we begin with the webinar, I'd like to give a quick introduction about Kalpita Technologies and Vishwa, our speaker for today's webinar. Kalpita Technology is an enterprise software development company with 6 years of excellence. We're headquartered in Bangalore, India, and we also have a physical office at Austin, Texas, US. We are a Microsoft Gold partner with SOC 2 certified and recognized as a great place to work since 2021. So, about Vishwa, Vishwa has nearly 2 decades of expertise in quality assurance, framework development, automation, and mentorship. He has worked in Germany and in India, and his proficiency spans various domains, including telecom, healthcare, privacy, and information security. Throughout his career, Vishwa has led numerous projects ensuring the highest quality standards and efficient testing process. He has developed and implemented robust automated testing frameworks across the different tools and technologies. Without further ado, I'll hand over the session to Vishwa. Please note, we will be having the Q&A sessions post the webinar. Request everyone to drop down the questions in the chat box so that we can discuss that later. Vishwa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Arjun, for the introduction. So it was very nice to hear about myself first. Thanks for that. So let's quickly start the session. So I'll just share my slide. Okay, is it fine? Arjun, is it fine? Can you hear me?
Yeah, Vishwa.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. So today I'm going to talk on an interesting topic, which is called shift left. And ideally, shift left is a practice, I know, which will actually accelerate the quality assurance in agile environment. And this is one of the steps we can say where quality assurance can be accelerated in a fast pace in agile environment. And ideally, as you know, in most of the companies and most organizations, we do have the agile environment, and it makes a lot of sense when we talk about accelerating the quality assurance in this area, right? And what best is to have a certain methodologies or a practice to start with that. So I just want to quickly start with an agenda. So then we will get into the whole topic. Okay, this would be my agenda for the day, where we'll start with an introduction. In the introduction, right? So we'll just talk about what exactly a shift left, what is the term shift left exactly literally means for us, and we'll try to see how exactly shift left is actually kind of like correlate on the SDLC, so that what is shift left, you will really understand about the essence of that. Post that, we'll also understand about the legacy, right? So once before starting to something new, we should know what exactly we have old one, right? So that was the basic thing to know the difference. So unless and if you know what we had legacy, it is very difficult to understand what is exactly, like a changes has been made and how exactly it's going to implement it. So that will be the second topic where we'll talk about shift left versus legacy thing. Post that, why exactly we are getting into a shift left from the legacy, right? So we'll more talk about the cost optimization part, in which you will really see. Okay, I have an interesting, graphs to share. I hope it will not be boring for sure, but you'll have a very, like nice analogy to understand the difference or the impact. I can say more than a difference. I can say you can see an impact. What happens, when you, kind of get the shift left to your system, right? To your SDLC life cycle. There is a case study, or I can say there is kind of a kind of an analogy which is came, and then you can clearly see the difference during that session at that point. And also we would like to talk more on the challenges, right, in the traditional testing approach, because eventually that will help us to understand why we are moving into shift left. So that is what the problem we'll understand. Then we will actually get into the quality first, shift left. Post that, we'll understand what are the key importance of the shift left. And the next part would be that if you really want to, get into implement the shift left in any of the organization, what are the basic things you should know it, right? Like that's called implementation strategy. We'll just talk about that. And there is also kind of a cons related to the shift left, are the challenges we can say. Again, there are mitigations for also that. So we'll talk about what exactly the challenges we'll have it once you start, getting shift left to your organization or somewhere, and then what kind of a challenge you'll face and how exactly to mitigate it, right? That's going to be the next part. Last but not the least, what exactly a future of shift lefting it, right? So a lot of things are coming right now. If you see AI and other things are coming to future, and then using those capabilities, right? How we will see the future of shift lefting? Is it like going to evaporate, or is it going to be more empowered, right? So we'll talk more on those areas and then get into that. So finally, the conclusion part. So this is just a glimpse of it, which we started on thing. I'll just go one by one now. So that we'll get into exactly the shift left concept from the beginning. Okay. When we start a shift left, let's understand what is exactly a shift left. It is just a practice. It's a development practice, we can say, where the main part of the shift left is to involve testing in early life cycle. So most of the time, what happens is that like testing is the one which comes later point of the time. So but shift left actually imposes or gives a practice to push the testing at the early life cycle. So that's the first part of the shift left. And why you call a shift left, right? You should understand what is exactly a shift left means. The people who knows about the SDLC life cycle, they do understand that there'll be like requirement, design, implementation, testing, and deployment. There are different life cycles, right? And most of the time, what happens, the testing comes post implementation, testing, and deployment. However, shift left moves to the left side, even from the requirement and design perspective. How, what can be done, that will be the next level of understanding it. But shift left is basically shifting your testing efforts at an early stage to the left side of the software development cycle. That is what we're going to talk about that. And what is the advantage, right? When you get into we need to know the impact also when we, kind of do a shift lefting testing. So it basically addresses the issues earlier. When you issue, when you understand, when you issue, address, when you address the issue early, the advantage is that you can reduce a lot of cost. How? Again, we will see, because you will see the exact difference what happens when you get issues early and what happens when you get an issues at the later stage, right? How much a company get affected with the revenue or the turnaround time and everything, and the fast availability will come to know in the later stages. But yeah, having said that, it also gives a high quality software with a software, like faster pace in delivering that thing. So now, as I said, like we understood what is a shift left, where it comes in the SDLC life cycle. Now let's get into understanding between the legacy, right? So the old one, what exactly, how was it looks, and how exactly, a shift left made a change. Let's get to the next slide. Yeah, it seems to be a very, like nice graph. The left side, you can see traditional model, and right side is a shift left model. Okay, we have not done it at shift left. Okay, that's the reason it is on the right side. So let's understand that way. Okay, the traditional model, if you see, right, let's understand the graph. It is a very simple graph where the x coordinate itself is the cycle. But on the y-axis, you see the testing involved during these stages. So ideally, when you see the traditional life cycle model, this graph shows that most of the time the testing comes at the later part of the cycle, right? So that's the reason you see the graph of effort in the testing life cycle is goes on gradually. It comes at the peak during the last, like system testing or the support and maintenance, right? So that is what the traditional way. When you go with the waterfall model, or something which is traditional one. Having said that, it is something like a mirror image, right? So where the shift left model is the reverse way, where again we are having the same graph, but now the effort is different in the sense the testing efforts is more during the early stage of life cycle, and there's more kind of a preparations, you can say. There's more kind of a, testing at the unit testing level. A lot of things comes into picture, but ideally the thought process is to have most of the shifting testing efforts on the left parts. So looking at these graphs, you can clearly see that testing is shifted from most of the right part to the left part, right? Which eventually, kind of justifies the word shift left model. Ideally, we can justify that this can, kind of help cost level, right? At the end of the day, what we thought about think is how exactly much can, save the amount during our whole project life cycle, right? And cost is very, very important for any of the project. Let's get into the next topic. Again, so this is one of the graphs. There is a person called a software specialist in America, Caper Jones. He's an expert on methodologies. He has derived this very wonderful graph. So ideally, when you see, guys, it looks very complex. Let me explain you one by one, then you will really understand. It's so simple to understand, okay? But for me also, the first time when I saw it, it was very, like big deal. But let's get into, one by one things, then you'll understand it, right? Okay, again, let's go with only we'll understand the legacy. Once we understand the legacy, then it is very easy to understand the shift left impact on that. So again, here, right, the x-axis, we have different types of testings like coding, unit test, functional test, system test, and then the release, right? This is the typical STLC, we can say, the software testing lifecycle, how exactly it happens. And on the y-axis, it is percentage of defects introduced during the whole cycle. Now, if you see, it is a very generic thing that the first, this graph, right, it is a percentage of injection of defects in any of the system, right? Because most of the issues are the bugs are introduced during the initial phase of the life cycles. That is the one thing. And this is a common trend. For example, if you see this trend and this trend remains same, it doesn't matter whether it is shift left or the shift right, the trend remains same. However, the second part, we'll talk about the cost to repair. This is an interesting affair. What I can say is 1x, 4x, 10x, 40x, and 640x. So it is a multiple. Exact what we are saying about here is that assume that if you are finding an issue at the coding level, right? So in that case, how much a cost it will cost to a company is around 1x, because the turnaround time is very, very less, right? So where you'll be fixing quickly and then kind of checking it and doing it out. But over a period of time, when you go to the next level, so it increases more. For example, during the unit test, if you find, again, it is still less, but still it is around 4x, right? It costs more. Then comes to the functional test. You see, now what is happening is that the cost is getting more, because once you do some kind of a testing, again, you have to reiterate all these things, right, from the beginning. So it's like, it starts, getting double, and at least, okay, even in the system level testing, it is 40x around that, okay? But unfortunately, if the issue is found during the release time, right? If you see this cost to repair the defect, it goes exponentially. And 640x, it means that it is so much of effort. The cost to company will be, like too much when you identify a bug at the release level, right? Because there's a lot of turnarounds happens from the, again, coding, fixing, documenting. So there's a hell lot of, things which comes into picture, right? So ideally, what happens is that this is how the whole process goes on. Now, this is what we have to talk about, the percentage of defects found. In the legacy way, what used to happen is that, so this is fine. But ideally, what used to happen is that, like, we used to get most of the issues at the system level. It means that still, if you're using a legacy, even though you're not getting into the release level, but in the system level, you'll be getting a 40x of, investment you're doing it out. It is still huge, right? For a company where you are actually investing a 40 times during the system, it means that you are identifying more issues on the system level, right? So which will eventually cost you more. Again, how exactly a shift left help, right? So if you see on the right side, right, shift left actually, it's the same graph. The only difference is this red line, right? And this is the mark. So now you see when get into the shift left method of testing, most of the issues are we are finding during the unit testing and functional testing. If you see here, right? But eventually, when it go to system level testing, it actually nailed downs less than 40, right? So it means that theoretically, what is like understand from the case studies and things which is done by the John Kaper, he is actually came up with this kind of a case study saying that okay, how much it's going to cost, and this is how exactly we can see the difference when you try to induce that, right? This is the high level thing, and let's get into the next thing. What exactly? And again, we also see more challenges what we had even before getting into the shift left, right? So these are the very basic challenges what we had when we had a traditional thing. Delayed feedback. In the sense, what used to happen is that since the testing used to come at the later stage, there is always, kind of a delayed thing as we see, right? The issues that comes at system level. It means that there's a lot of costly work, rework used to go on to fix that issue. That is how it used to go. So siloed responsibilities. In the sense, what happens, one of the interesting part about the system shift left is that, so we talk more on the next part, which is like collaboration. But during the legacy, there was not much kind of a collaboration used to happen between the testers, developers, and then the stakeholders, which eventually used to create a gap, right? So it used to get a void there where people used to have a lot of disconnects, and that also creates a lot of problem, right? The people used to have their own responsibilities, and then they are not bothered about other things. There was no kind of a collaboration or kind of a teamwork which used to happen, and that is also one of the challenges which we had in the traditional way. One of the important things is with respect to the stakeholder is the limited visibility. So when we talk about the limited visibility, it means that with the legacy approach, the stakeholders who are having the major part of the this project, so they don't, since testing happening at the later stage, they didn't have however I can say they don't have actually a confidence on the quality itself, because report used to come at the later stage. So the confidence level is also very less, and then the visibility is very low because of the quality reason. So that is what actually kind of things caused it. Now we talked about all these challenges and everything. So now what will be the solution? This is one of the, I can say this is not the only solution. This is one of the solution to get into the shift left. Now, whatever we talked about all these data points, let's get into the shift left, and then we'll see how exactly the shift left can address these limitations or challenges, right? So let's get into that. Okay, this again interesting, I can say analogy, we can think of it. If you see, this is an SDLC life cycle. This is a very basic SDLC life cycle where requirement, design, development, integration, testing, deployment, maintenance, everything is there. And we are calling it out shift left. So when exactly we say shift left is achieved is when you see a reducing a cost and higher efficiency and higher quality. Combinedly can contribute to a shift left. So shift left can actually help to get all these in place. And we'll talk more about shift left. The other analogy how we can talk about the shift left is what exactly a shift left can offer, right? It can offer that what exactly it tells is to mainly a testing part. It is focused on the testing. Okay, and I want to reiterate that shift left is mainly on the testing part. It says that test everything, test every time, test early, test continuously, involve testers in every stage, and prevention that better than cure. So it means that most of the time we are talking about testing early phase, testing everything every time continuously and involving testers in every phase, right? So that actually gives impact, that actually analogy gives for the shift left. So let's get into the key aspects, right? What exactly the key aspects for a shift left? Yeah. So there are many aspects to start about, but I just picked a few of things which I want to highlight it, which can add on a lot of value to the shift left. Early involvement QA. So we talked about right? Because once a QA involves early, it means that the QA knows a lot of design aspects, he knows that what technology used, what kind of a design is done, what kind of a like testing need to be invoked for upcoming product. So this actually helps a tester to understand and to be on the common page what the BA or the developer are like the stakeholders are under, getting into the next shape, right? That's the reason engagement of testers early is very important for this shift left, so as to make it effective, right? And of course, collaborative planning. So since, as we said, right, so since testing was never considered as a primary aspect, so that's the reason it used to push at the last. But if you make using the shift left, right, what it tells is you have to have early people to be there in the collaborative planning so that they know what exactly is happening, what is the milestones, and then what is the what type of testing has to do and everything. So these are all things we can actually collaboratively understand and then involve in that. The second point is collaborative dev team takeaways, right? So this is an interesting thing. The developer, right, who is working on that, like, how can a developer can be taken advantage of this particular shift left is that most of the developer here, right, so who might have seen the trend that um, the issues comes more at the system level, right, where you will understand that there's a lot of gap in our design and then we'll try to fix it, right? But this shift left, what exactly it gives is it gives a flexibility where you upfront know what kind of a scenarios was written, and the developer will be understanding, okay, if there is any gap in a system. So he's more proactively fixes those design changes because ideally the thought process of tester and the developer is more different. And what it actually helps is to fill the gap. And the issues which are supposed to come at the system level is we can get in the early stage. That was the thought process to be proactive collaboration, right? And of course, automated test and with the CI/CD integration will sure help most of the developer, because what happens most of the times when you don't have this kind of a mechanism, if you make any changes, then you have to rely on testing team to do a manual testing and then give a health of the build, right? If everything is automated and everything is checked in and it's part of a CI/CD pipeline, so you can actually just like start the once you push your changes, start the job, and you'll be able to see your is there any breakage happened or a sanity, right? It does not involve any again involvement of any testers and everything. So this is also kind of a concepts which like shift left emphasizes more on top of that. Next would be continuous feedback. So as we said, right, so one of the important part of aspects about the shift left is to have the feedback loops. It means that you should have thorough automation test cases, code reviews, retrospectives, and improvement over a period of time. And this retrospective will definitely, can course correct what exactly the issues we had and how exactly we are going to address it, right? So this becomes a key part as a part of a shift left. Risk mitigation, of course. If you are identifying issues early, which means that there's a lot of potential issue related to the security vulnerables it could be, or the performance, we can find out early. And most of the people do know that, like who have worked on a lot of big systems and everything, they do understand that the issue which comes on the performance and then the securities are more, like I can say like expensive at the later stage. And it takes a lot of effort, rework to get into the shape, right? So that's the reason if you are following a shift left with, like involving testing early phase life cycle and then getting into what best, it can mitigate all those kind of risks. And at the end of the day, we will be faster to the market. So that is what the key aspects which we are talking about. Now, okay, the next question is that, okay, we know what exactly shift left and what are the key aspects to that. How to actually implement this in any organization, right? What is the strategy you want to apply if you really want to, okay, I like this shift left, that's fine, but what could I do to implement in my organization is what the next question comes to the picture, right? So then this is what we will talk about the next part. Basically, important thing what we talk about shift implementation strategy is to understand that it is more on the leadership support, because it requires a lot of time, effort, resources, and then the process, right? So the first support always should come from the leadership team, where they are ready to make these changes, and they are very well know the pros and cons, and they are very well like invest time and money for that. That is what the first before implementing strategy we should talk about that particular thing is in place. Then there are very interesting things which I outlined on the right side. If you see that how exactly you can actually implement it, right? So the best way is to start with the shift left is to have the agile methodologies, of course, because agile methodologies nowadays everybody is using it out. But how effective is what matters at the end of the day, because agile is not only just one thing. There are a lot of things comes into picture. I'm just going to highlight few key points. What can make a difference with respect to shift left, right? What exactly shift left tells to do it when you want to get into this mode, right? Um, if you see, when you start with the shift left, right, try to do a lot of TDD and BDD, right? So TDD is nothing but test driven development, and BDD is nothing but behavioral driven development. So in the TDD, most of the time, what we is like a fail first iterative process. You are failing it, writing it, fixing it, and doing it, right? This is more kind of a iterative process which we have to follow it out. And BDD is more on the system level, right? Or the behavioral understanding it out. This BDD actually kind of closes the gap between the different stakeholders, from the tester to the developer and to the product owner or the BA, right? So because the BDD gives a very informative way, what are the test cases is written in which, in its simple English language, people can really understand the coverage, and is it exactly the validation also. So it is more kind of a collaborative effort which actually we can use it. Next is shift left also kind of enforces to have the continuous feedback we talked about, right? It's like reviews, or it could be automation runs, getting the early issues. That's how it also emphasizes more on the feedback. The next is using the collaborative tools, which also helps to implement the shift left, where you might have seen a lot of tools. It could be like Wiki, or it could be Rally, or any other tool, right? If you take it, right? Azure DevOps and everything, there are a lot of collaborative tools which will actually help us to use better way of communicating, collaborating with the team. And if there is no gap and everybody is on the same page, use with these collaborative tools will definitely minimize the gap, and again we are getting faster to the market. That's the one thing. Next would be on the static code analysis and code review. Of course, Sonar is one of the tool what we generally people use it, and it's like a gatekeeper. And and if you just check in the code, you will come to know whether your code quality is good or not, and we can just move ahead or not, right? So this also kind of a things which will help to get into the fast mode. And finally, retrospective. So I think in the agile we know, right, most of the thing we do a retrospective and understand. And we know what are to be fixed for next sprint and then move on, right? Last but not the least, the continuous learning will also do it. So these are all the strategy which we can use it to get into the implementation of shift left, right? Now, so once, okay, I'm fine that, okay, now I know what to do, how to exactly do a strategy. But even before that, right? So when I start to do this, what kind of a challenges, and I'll get it right. So anything has a challenges, right? So it looks very straightforward when we talk about, you do this, do this, do this. But when you exactly get into the situation, right, you should know upfront what kind of a problem I will face if I start shift lifting from the day one, right? Tomorrow, for example, if I want to start from tomorrow, what exactly I can face a problem. So let's talk about that. We'll not just talk about the problems, we'll talk about the mitigations, right? How exactly the challenges can also be addressed is what we'll talk about that. Interesting thing is, forget about the shift left, anything new has always have the cultural resistance, right? So because each and every company, people, they follow certain culture, they follow culture, I can say like our rules and regulations and everything. So ideally it becomes difficult for anybody to go for a new change. That is the basic thing to start with that. How to exactly mitigate this problem, right? So we have the problem, right? The cultural resistance, but how can we mitigate this problem? So the mitigation involves in multiple ways. As I said, the first thing is that the main stakeholders, right? The leadership team is ready to take this cultural change, because they are the people who are actually going to make sure that the person knows the benefits, right? So because the main thing is you have to educate. When you have the problem with the cultural resistance, you have to educate like what is the best outcome we will get it out at the end of the day. It could be with successful used to case studies, because sometimes what happens is always an example which will help you to get a confidence from the stakeholders and then the other peoples. So try to get into that mode, and we can just minimize the cultural resistance. That is one thing of doing it out. So integration issues. Now, we know, right? As shift left, we are moving testing at the left side. It is we are early, right? So we are early in the game. So it means that there are a lot of things which are not ready at this point, and it's very obvious that if things are not ready, but still we have to test it. The, this could be the problem. But what exactly the mitigation is that? So we are actually kind of using a mock and then the stub services, right? Where you're not, it's not end-to-end ready, but still we can use some mock services and then stubs to make the end-to-end flow, and still we can go ahead with that testing. This is one of the mitigation way we can handle the integration issues. Of course, next is the maintenance, increased test maintenance. So it's basically what happens is that, so since again, we are talking about moving testing at the early stage, it could create a lot of chaos on the maintenance part. It means that there are a lot of adapt changes happens. There'll be something, like which is new implementation happens. So now what the best part is that the most important part, what we should consider is to coming up with a robust framework, right? So which the framework, what we are writing for automation should be more robust enough to handle changes with less impact. It could be making more modularized, more structured wise, more, like having a different object repository. If you take like Selenium or any kind of a thing, right? What we do is like we maintain a separate repository because there is a lot of tendency of changing some IDs or XPaths and everything. So we can address and making the proper repository, and changing one could affect in most of the other places reflected, right? So it's basically how exactly you're going to write automation framework, which will actually kind of, like minimize the impact. Of course, there will be an impact, but what best we can make it to minimize is what we are talking about here. The next would be skills and knowledge gaps, of course, because anything new requires an understanding of the technology, tools, or like a process gap and everything. And again, mitigation is very simple. You should have the trainings, you should have some certifications, and to the next level, so that like everybody is on the same page. They have the understanding well before they are getting into this, shift left or any kind of a new, process, right? That's the one thing. Last but not least, again, incomplete requirement. These are the very basic things. What happens most of the times, not every requirement is ready or everything is completed. In that case, what exactly the shift left tells is that so you should actually collaborate more, in the sense like you have to closely work with the stakeholder to get the clarity, right? And then also you should have, like be flexible to change your testing strategy at any point because of something happens. So assume that there is a change happens to be focused more on the performance. You have to shift your strategy to more on the focusing on testing on performance level, or security level, or functionality, right? So you have to be very open on actually kind of testing to a different, shifting to a different strategy if it is needed, right? That is how. Now, so having said that, we talked about starting what is shift left, and like what are the legacy, and what is exactly, like challenges, and what is exactly the implementation way, right? Now, what exactly happens now in the future, right? So when future means right now we are in the future, we can assume that because already we have a lot of good things. But let's talk about what exactly an impact on the shift left due to the new latest technologies, which is what the next slide talks about. Okay, I think everybody knows about the AI. So AI is now been used by everybody. So one of the interesting thing is actually shift left is more empowered with the AI. It's a very simple logic. When we talk about shift left, what we are doing is we are moving a lot of things testing early phase. So it means that we need a lot of things to be automated, a lot of things to be early available, which can be done through the feature level testing, right? For example, if you do AI machine learning integration, right? So there is something called test data AI. It generates actually automated tests by himself. So if you do some kind of a machine learning and everything, so it's actually generate that. So using such kind of a technology, you are actually automating fast things. Again, not going with the legacy of writing, doing and everything, but doing in a fast pace. It means that we are ready with the shift left testing strategy, right? The second would be on the enhanced CI/CD. Right now, most of the CI/CD what we do is we have seen the sonar, right? So where there is a gatekeeper who is going to actually tell about the vulnerabilities or the warnings and everything. But there is also a future where code review happens automatically. The CI/CD also. You don't have to again have one more person. So you can have code review, but after check-in, they'll be good. For example, code climate is one of the tool where it can, if you integrate that, it will use again. It has to evolve, but it is started on that direction where the code review is also kind of like started getting to the next level. Last one more thing is that so when we you might have seen a lot of things what happened, automation is mostly now moving towards less code or no code, right? because people are so lazy that they don't want to write a code. So they just want to, like use some kind of flows to automate and everything. So that's the reason is also a feature, right? So ideally, what we're talking about here is, even though the future, a lot of new technologies are coming to the picture, they're actually kind of helping shift left to be more effective, right? Because using these tools and kind of integration, you are actually kind of emphasizing more on shift left, and you are actually pushing testing even as much as possible to the left side. Otherwise, what happens, doing all these things manually will take more time, and again it is going to like not justify the shift left approach. But having said that, having then kind of advantages of the shift left with the latest technology can help you to be better, utilize the approach itself. This is what the future, and there'll be more thing. I have just covered only few things about this particular topic. um, yes, last about the conclusion. So of course, shift lefting is a powerful approach because you've seen what exactly an impact it will do on the pricing, or it could be in RI, and then what are the issues and the mitigations we have done it. So the main basic thing is that it gives a quality faster and more effectively, right? That's the first part of it. And main part is, since if you're integrating this shift left at the early of the life cycle, it is actually kind of helping you to get issues early, reduce the technical debt, of course, and then of course better value for the customer, right? So what they are paying for that. So and then it is fastest to the market. So ideally, this is the high level, we can say there's a lot and more kind of advantages we have, or using the shift left. But yeah, so I just wanted to conclude on these very basic, interesting, important aspects about the shift left. um that's what I had it. So let's go to the QA.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Vishwa, for the insightful session. We will now move on to the Q&A segment. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we will address as many as we can. Vishwa, we have the first question here
Yeah.
from Srinath. While discussing about shift left, you also spoke about shift right. What's the difference between them, and when does one use shift right?
Okay, it's a nice question. So thank you, Srinath. So yeah, so shift left and shift right, right? So it's both are like complementing each other. So we mostly talked about shift left, where we are early in the game, right? So where we are focusing every testing on the left side of that. So shift left is completely opposite, where there is a phase called maintenance, right? So there is a, in the maintenance, we have to have a dedicated kind of like a approach for testing and a separate level of testing. So we are moving completely focusing testing a different approach on the right side. That's what we call this right shift right. It is again complementing, it is at the last fag end of the testing. So that's the reason we call it a shift right. And then the focus and then the approach is again, it's a different, like what we talked about the shift left. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vishwa, for answering that question. We have one more question from Prajwal Venkatesh. He says,
Okay.
what phase of shift left testing and testing frameworks stack are decided?
Can I come again? Sorry. Can you repeat?
What phase of shift left testing the testing frameworks stack are decided?
It's basically, answer is very simple, and it also needs analysis, because since the testing started at the early phase, right? It means that as I talked about one of the slides, where we the tester, when he involves at the beginning, he knows what kind of a tools and technologies he's been used in the overall the project, right? For example, he the tester knows what tech stacks to use, what is the point of testing. For example, assume that during the development we came to know there are some kind of APIs to test it and everything. So then the tester, right, can actually start thinking about how exactly I can do a API testing. It could be using some kind of a libraries, or it could be like using any kind of a rest assured or any libraries which we can help that. Or if it is purely UI, then again it is a different approach. And again, it also depends on if there is an interactions between, for example, Windows and non-Windows desktop applications. So what could be an approach? So what, long story short, that the approach can be decided at the early stage if the tester is involved early and he knows in and out of the technology what is used and what exactly how can it be tested, right? Then he can start his own writing a framework or coming with this approach, and you can be validating that way.
Thank you so much, Vishwa, for answering Prajwal's question. Any more question, please put in the chat box. Any questions from anyone? Okay. Should we wait for 5 minutes, Vishwa,
Yeah,
for the
I'm fine with
questions?
that. I'm fine with that.
If you have more questions, please do put in the chat box so Vishwa would answer your questions. We have one more question from Sunil Gowda, Vishwa. Will Shift left Azure's 100% bug-free software? If not, is it only reducing the time frame of SDLC?
So thanks, Anil, for pointing it out. So none of the approach, right, which gives assure of 100%, okay? Because it is not practical to say that, okay, any kind of approach or any kind of framework will provide you 100% assurity, right? It's basically a kind of a reducing a defect, what we say, to be precisely. It is not like assurance or something, but yeah, it is basically reducing as much as possible and identifying the issues, right? Yes, what you said is right, where you are reducing the time frame, right? So in the sense, like since you're finding the issues early, it means that you are actually identifying the bugs early. It means that the turnaround time is very less, and then going to the market is fast, right? Otherwise, what happens if you find the issue at the later stage, then you have to postpone your deliveries, right? So it means that it is affecting the timeline. So ideally, what we are talking about is shift left actually helps you to faster to the market, right? With quality. And again, 100% everything is very subjective because nobody can claim that. But yeah, reducing the defect and then reducing the cost of to the market is what needed at the end of the day, right? How we are improvising every time is what matters. Hope it clarifies that.
Thank you so much, Vishwa, for answering Sunil's question. Uh, any more question to ask? Please put down in the chat box. I guess no one has much questions, Vishwa. Okay, so uh, thanks so much, Vishwa, for the insightful session. And thanks to all the participants for joining us and engaging with the session. Before we sign off, don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn to stay updated on our upcoming webinar and other exciting news from Kalpita Technologies. We have dropped a LinkedIn page link in the chat box. Request you all to follow us. Thank you once again and have a great day and a nice weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.